Hello, everybody. Here we go again for another round of morning gym poetry. And this poetry reading is not a class in poetry. I don't really need to repeat that. You all know that. And the nice thing about that is we don't have any exams. Glory be. But on the other hand, we all might learn a little something about poetry as we go along. I know I do. In getting ready for these episodes, I learned things I didn't know. And I've been studying poetry for about 75 years, in one way or another. And if some listener feels confused or doesn't get a certain poem, who cares really? I mean, you shouldn't care. You won't be canceled. We don't do that here. And perhaps later it will come to you, or a second time around with a similar poem, you'll have a eureka moment. Yeah, a eureka moment. And then you'll understand it better. But mainly, let's just have fun. I'm going to have a little explanatory stuff to say today about one of our poems because it's so many hundreds of years old. And the poems in general that we're having today, well, in general and particular, are love poems. These are among the most enduring kinds of poems that poets have written. But I had the experience the last couple of months of reading two books of poetry, and which the poets didn't seem to love anybody, which is kind of a sad commentary for them, except maybe they love themselves. I think that could be said. Okay, we know some people aren't sure they love their spouses even once the honeymoon is over, but then they fall in love all over again in time. Others start out thinking they are in love but really don't understand it until maybe 5 or 10 years have passed and they're a little bit more mature. Then they know for sure. Others have to be married more than once before it's right. Sometimes that's not their fault. There may be a death. And other times it's because they made bad choices. And it's only reasonable for them to want to try again. If you go beyond 2 or 3 tries without a winner, well, sometimes the wheel of fortune is really not on your side. And then, too, it becomes so expensive that only movie stars can keep going down that path. And some of them do. We know those stories very well. But that's not the story of our session today, not at all. Shakespeare had some sonnets that are among the greatest love poems of all time. And I've got this book here. It's rather tattered and torn. But please look at the upper corner at the price I paid for this. This book cost me 35 cents when I was in college. That tells you how many long years ago that was. And sadly enough, it was printed on paper that had a fairly high sulfur content, so you can see what happened. This is Sonnet 18, and many of you have heard it before, but it is one of the most classic love poems of all time. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So Shakespeare is saying that while humans may not live very long, his sonnets will, and he was so right about that. Another poem from long ago was John Donne. He was a 17th century poet, and he was also the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in London, eventually in his life, which was a very interesting life. Donne didn't let his holy orders get too much in the way of his love life, I would have to say. And you'll understand that better after we read a poem of his called The Flea. Mark but this flea, and mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two, and this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay, 3 lives in one flea spare, where we almost, yea, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed, and marriage temple is, though parents grudge. And you, we are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though use make you apt to kill me. Let not that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and sayest that thou findest not thyself, nor me the weaker now? 'Tis true, 'tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yieldst to me, will waste, as this flea's death took life from thee. Well, poems like this are called metaphysical poems. And by that, we mean that he takes language and plays with it. He turns it around and excuse me, changes the meaning. Let's go through this just briefly. And I might add that the common flea in Donne's time, it was an afflictor of humans just as much or more as of dogs and cats and other mammals. So getting bitten by a flea was really not very unusual. So the flea bites him, and then he says, but now it bit me first, and now it's sucking thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead, yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered dwells with one blood made of two, and this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay, 3 lives in one flea spare. He sees that his lover is about to kill the bloody flea. She's obviously not listening to his woeful words. And he says, though parents grudge, and you, we are met and cloistered in these living walls. And he says, though use make you apt to kill me, he's saying, I'm toying with you, and you're getting upset by that. But do not add the murder of the flea to the murder you're contemplating doing on me, because that would be 3 sins all at one time. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail. She has gone ahead and killed the flea. And he says, the flea was innocent. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? In other words, only 1 drop of blood in the flea is the blood from you, so why are you so upset? Yet thou triumphst, in other words, you killed the flea, and sayest that thou findest not thyself nor me the weaker now. He says, you're telling me that even though the flea's dead, and he's taken with him my blood and your blood, you don't feel any weaker. And he says, true then, learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yieldest to me, will waste, as this flea's death took life from thee. Just a tiny bit of honor will you lose by sleeping with me. Okay, that's John Donne, a very clever little bugger, if there ever was one. And yet, he wrote one of the great sermons of all times. You remember that sermon, don't you? Where he says that any man's death takes away a piece of the main, and we are all made less by it. That was a great sermon. Okay, I'm moving on now to more modern things. This is Stage Whispers, poetry by Roy Beckmeyer. Roy Beckmeyer is one of the better poems Kansas has produced, better poets. And he's got a poem called Blessings, which the epigram says is for Pat, who happens to be his wife. And here's the poem. Your mother's hair, your father's nose, the bedroom eyes your own, the whispered words that could fill tomes, the hands my hands enclose, the back you turned, but not for long, the tears that stained the floor, the times when I, lost and unmoored, admitted I was wrong. The ways you changed that never seemed to change the one you are, this life foreseen from off so far, we made real from our dreams. I think that's a beautiful poem about love and what it means between two people. And, well, I don't always do this. As you know, I'm wont to read a poem of my own. And this I'm doing today in honor of my late wife, Marcia. I wrote this poem in 2015 and gave it to her inside an anniversary card on our wedding anniversary. And it's called The Time of Our Lives, and the epigram is Reflections on a Long Marriage. The time of our lives is floating softly on, as if by silent, curious winds thus born. Each blink, each smile, and every stormy sky marks a steady passage. It's not by drama that our show goes on, and can we say that we will be reminded of the day when last we saw a tiny detail of the art our vision can no longer tease apart? It's not in burning bushes, gods in smoke, or vasty taxes making us go broke, the naming a new coffee or a tea or founding of a colony beyond the sea that we remember coming down this stretch. Think, rather, how we taught the dog to fetch and caught the sunset in a photo sketch. This is from Immortal Prairie and Other Poems that was published later in 2015. Well, that's all for this time around. Enjoy and reflect on our upcoming Memorial Day and what it means. There are in most of our lives sons, husbands, fathers, brothers, and best friends buried in far-flung cemeteries, if they were lucky to be so buried. And we think of them in the next 2 days as those who fought for the lives of plenty and the lives of ease that we now have. Thanks unto them all. Let's get together again next week. Goodbye.